Hello, welcome back to the ETCMA Research Task Force Meet the Experts interview series. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Edward Chiu, who will be sharing his thoughts, experiences, advice about case reporting. Dr. Chiu is a licensed acupuncturist and a doctor of acupuncture and oriental medicine, and has been teaching acupuncture case report writing in the US for over 10 years. He earned his undergraduate degree in biology at Harvard University with graduate coursework in science education. After earning his master's degree at the New England School of Acupuncture and his doctorate degree in acupuncture and at the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, he spent time studying and pursuing traditional apprenticeship in Taiwan, later participating as a research acupuncturist in the US, while also concurrently in private practice. He has served on the doctoral faculty of several acupuncturist colleges and schools in the United States, and has recently published a book, Writing Acupuncture Case Reports, Theory and Practice. With over 2 decades of experience, he represents the third generation of his family to follow in practicing traditional Chinese medicine. Hello and welcome, Dr. Chiu.
Thank you, Dr. A, for the nice introduction. It's nice to be here.
Likewise. So it's an interesting time zone difference between East Coast in the West Coast in the United States and Europe, Central Europe. So your day is starting, my day is almost ending.
All right. I'm glad we were able to get together and bridge the continents.
Exactly. I believe it's traditional to bridge when we're discussing, especially when we're discussing traditional medicine, because I believe traditional Chinese medicine particularly has played a key role in that aspect of bridging, in connecting the two disparate elements, even in medicine, allowing us to bridge the gap between allopathics and other practices of medicine. So right. what I wanted to do today was take a few moments of your busy schedule and ask you some pertinent questions with regards to case reporting. As part of the pyramid of research, case reporting is often looked at, frowned upon as not valid. It's not as objective, for example, as a double, triple blind case study or a meta-analysis. However, I look at pyramids in a different way. I look at from the top down, I look at bottom up. Case reporting and expert opinions and these types of managed reports can form the basis for a lot of other research that can come out of it. One of the biggest benefits of case reporting is that it engenders hypothesis formation. It allows others to think about, well, if this works, maybe we can create a larger, more foundational research that can be spurred out of that case report. So I wanted to ask you, for example, your opinions, if you will, on what's your background by way of how you got motivated to embrace the topic of case reporting.
Sure. So in terms of how I got started, I was exposed to acupuncture at a young age. My father was both a Western medicine practitioner and anesthesiologist, and he practiced Chinese medicine and acupuncture as well, sort of one in the morning at the hospital and one in the afternoon at the family clinic. And at that time, I was at the front desk and, helping out in the clinic. He would call me back and say, hey, I need to show you something interesting that's been going on. And whenever he had an interesting case. So I was exposed at a young age. Went to acupuncture school in the States, and then had the opportunity to go to Taiwan to study with a few different folks. So at that time, I did some observation in a few different hospitals, but also took on a few different traditional apprenticeships. And it was definitely interesting to see the difference in the practice. But one of the things that really caught my eye was that Chinese medicine really came alive when, especially during those apprenticeships, when there were those interesting cases and something that was a little bit unusual, out of the ordinary, that I could, learn something new from as a practitioner. We often think about as case reports as being important, of course, in terms of the basic research, being able to help us to form hypotheses. But it's also very important in terms of education and practice, in terms of helping us to understand more about how the medicine works.
That's an excellent observation. In fact, I often say. All of the wisdom that we study today, from the Huangdi to the Piwei Lun to the Shan'an Lun, any of the classic wisdom that came to us came by way of case reporting, came by way of their reporting and documentation. If they hadn't case reported, if they had not documented these unique cases or their experiences in their clinical practices, we would not have that knowledge. So I think the value of conducting and continuing case reporting is significant. So I appreciate your input on that. Now, in your clinical experience, what are some of the key contributions you think case reporting has made for your own practice?
Sure. So there are a couple of aspects to it in terms of how it has influenced practice. I guess the first that I wanted to mention is that reading case reports that are written by other experts in the field can help us to understand how they think. So with acupuncture, as you mentioned, the case report is often thought of as sort of the bottom of the period for making hypotheses. But in terms of practice and in terms of a type of research that can feed and influence how we make decisions, understanding how other experts think is really key to be able to sort of guide our clinical processes. So that's kind of the first piece, being able to read and understand the thoughts and processes, the logic of experienced folks who have done a lot of experience, who've had a lot of experience, and perhaps done a lot of translation and interpretation. The other piece is actually, that I've learned from, in particular, is it has to do with the process of writing case reports. Now, in the States, as part of the entry-level education, students are pretty much all required to write case reports to demonstrate for their instructors that they're capable of following the steps to an interview, diagnosis, coming up with a treatment plan, and asking the patients about their outcomes. And so, the basic process of medicine.
Yeah, soap notes and treatment protocols, etc. Yeah.
Yes. So in the process of taking those soap notes and writing it into an actual case report, you realize that, oh, okay, well, I think that in my interview, I should have asked this question, or perhaps, I didn't record their range of motion at the very beginning to be able to get the baseline. And it not only points out the sort of pieces of the process that could be improved in terms of the questions and the interview, but in terms of the process of diagnosis and treatment. Perhaps you say, okay, well, here's my diagnosis, and these are all the points I used. Well, the points have to match the diagnosis. And very often, as I've been teaching case report writing, a lot of students, they come up with their diagnosis and they put together the treatment plan, and here are the points. It doesn't match. And there are certain points that they use that don't really fit into the diagnosis. So in that case, it's like, okay, well, maybe we either need to rethink the diagnosis, or we could possibly pare down or refine our treatment so that it is more effective and more efficient. So the writing process really helps us to hone our clinical skills.
Absolutely. Excellent observation. The documentation process itself is a learning process. All of my students, I basically, whenever I teach them, I tell them, okay, I'm going to give you the information, but then I want you to give it back to yourself in your own words. So start documenting these, write these things in your own. As you take an intake, as you do a full patient intake, all that information, you can then review it from a fresh perspective. And as you said, it can clearly illustrate, oh, you know what? I missed this part. Or, you know what, wait a minute, what is this point combination doing with this diagnosis? They don't match. Where did I go wrong? How can I improve that process? So an excellent observation.
Right. And then also the idea that, as a profession, we're trying to become, to put together notes and standards that match the Western medicine profession in terms of being thorough with our note-taking and thorough with being able to follow through exactly the logic, coming up with standards to put together a proper case report is going to be very useful for our profession.
It's essential, I think, essential. And that brings me up to our next question. Do you have any preferred reporting model or methodology or tools that you've come across that you could share with our audience?
Sure. So back, the history of case reporting, it has changed quite a bit over time. As you mentioned in the very beginning with some of the classical literatures, the details were very sparse. They just kind of described a little bit about the patient and their condition, then jumped to the diagnosis and treatment and a little bit about the outcomes. Nowadays, in terms of the modern research expectations of how to put together a case report. There are a number of different pieces that are involved. So putting together an article, you need to have a title, an abstract.
Keywords,
keywords, exactly. And then being able to describe the patient and their presentation, information about their 10 questions or sort of their overall history. There are a number of steps I've actually outlined. I've outlined them in my book, Writing Acupuncture Case Reports, Theory and Practice. Part of that is about why we write case reports, and then half of the book is dedicated to the nuts and bolts of how to record outcomes, how to support your diagnosis, and more. Yeah.
How can someone obtain your book if they're interested? Do you have an ISBN number that I can share with my viewers?
I do, and the website that I've put together that talks a little bit about the book and some of the ideas we're talking about today in terms of why we need to write case reports. My website is www.acupuncturecasereports.org.
And by the way, for the readers, the ISBN, the book information, and the website link will be attached to the instructions or the description of the video that you're viewing. So a question about something that we're running across in Europe. Maybe you can shed some expertise on your expertise on it. There are developed standards, like you said, academic standards for writing these types of reports. And there are companies out there or standard organizations. One that comes to mind is CARE, which is a standards model for including all of the specific components and the structure of a case report that meets an academic submission to journals, etc. And then what type of assessment tools to include. Now, in many Western allopathic or conservative case reports, which I've been involved in, you have a broader tool set. You can do blood test analysis, you could do imaging results and imaging tests, and these could all be included into the documentation that you're presenting the case with. In traditional medicine, we have our tongue, our pulse, our observations, and I wanted your opinion on the MOPs, the medical outcome profiles, if you will, of patients that are self-assessed, which could be used by scaling it in like a Likert scale to demonstrate to at least collect some statistical data. What's your take on that?
So with the CARE initiative, I'm really glad that that came out a number of years ago. It lays out the important aspects of, which pieces of the case report are going to be important. For example, you have to have a title and abstract, an introduction section, et cetera. So all of the pieces are laid out. One of the things that it is missing, one of the things that we can add to that is, what is the quality of each of these sections? What is each section trying to do? So I often mention that the most important part of the case is the discussion. The discussion section is, after you've gone through and described the case and the outcomes, you take a step back and think, well, why is this important? Why is this significant? How can this improve what we do as practitioners? How can it influence research? Is it going to perhaps maybe suggest that for a treatment research study that the treatments need to be twice a week instead of once a week? So, there are aspects of a case study that can influence research. There are also aspects that can, it's perhaps the case is significant because it is the first evidence of acupuncture being effective for a particular condition.
A novel condition.
There are a lot of pieces to the significance of the case that can be elaborated upon, and that really helps the reader to grasp. Oh, okay. Well, why am I reading this in the first place? I'm not reading this just to find out the protocol. I'm reading this in order to find out how I can practice better medicine, to make it more efficient, perhaps using fewer points or using fewer treatments, or using a style of acupuncture that might be, more effective for that particular medicine. So one of the things that we can add on to the CARE initiative criteria is understanding why we write these case studies in the first place.
Excellent. I'm often asked a similar question, which part of the case report is most important, and people think that the abstract is the key component because that's the eye catcher. And I always tell them the abstract is the last thing to be written in a case report, because you have to have all of your literature review, you have to have all of your citing, you have to have your description, you have your case report, all of the content needs to be, the conclusions, everything needs to be there. And then from there, you filter down into one paragraph and into a very short statement which comprises your abstract. So, it's a backward move, but it's important to understand the significance.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that's what kind of grabs people and draws them in. Hey, you asked another question in terms of the the standardization, asking about the MOP and trying to understand the outcomes of patients using scales, and perhaps some people, I think in Western medicine and biomedicine, it's very common to use a questionnaire, so like a disability questionnaire. And that is, certainly useful in the broader sense of, are we able to prove efficacy in a clinical trial? Well, in a case report, because it's about an individual patient, we can become a lot more detailed in terms of the patients. We can describe in words rather in numbers. We can describe qualitatively what's happened to the patient. And quantitative research, don't get me wrong, is incredibly important. It allows us to support our the legal process in getting licensed. It helps us to become accepted by the Western medical system. But in terms of actually seeing patients, some of those qualitative details are going to be very important. So, for example, if you're doing a clinical trial on shoulder pain, for example, and the protocol is a certain set number of points, right? And it proves, okay, perhaps acupuncture is going to be efficacious. It's going to have efficacy for treating shoulder pain. In a case report, you can describe, okay, the patient has shoulder pain on the posterior aspect of the upper lateral aspect on the posterior side of the scapula, and so therefore we need to use the small intestine channel. And so that really it helps us to be able to practice we can understand what kinds of movements and what kinds of activities are affected. So it becomes much more specific. It helps us to understand, okay, well, if I have a patient with pain in the front, perhaps, that is not going to be as useful for me.
That's an interesting observation.
The scales don't capture any of that.
Yeah,
they're
you're
very
right.
important for us, but they don't capture some of the nuance.
It's the difference again between qualitative versus quantitative. You hit it right on the head, because a lot of modern scientific method likes to deal with numbers. They want to qualify, quantify, classify, put them in boxes, and to a certain degree that has a major role when you're doing a large meta study, or when you're doing a large clinical trial. But like you said, when you're dealing with an individual patient, you're describing a unique case. It's a novel presentation, and that varies. And the degree to which we can detail it and get into the actual patient outcome does play a role in differentiating the uniqueness of case reports.
So case reports can include both the quantitative. Of course, we want to measure their range of motion to be able to understand how well they're doing.
Yes.
However, getting their individual take on how they're improving is also important. A lot of the diagnostics that we do are also qualitative in nature. So for example, if we're looking for someone's tongue, you're not measuring the coat. For the pulse, it's either rapid or it's slow. You're not measuring a number. And these are all for the abdomen, if you do abdominal diagnosis, sometimes there's a tender spot. You're not measuring that per se, but if you can help to resolve a lot of those qualitative issues, that's what people are after. They want to, they're wanting to improve their quality of life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Agreed. So in summary, what are your recommendations to fellow practitioners, to our viewers? How would you ask them to approach if someone is interested in case reporting? What are some of the basic steps that they need to take in order to begin case reporting?
Sure. So the CARE article is a good place to start to understand what is required for writing a case report. My book, as I mentioned before, has a bit more detail on how to write all of those pieces. And there's a little piece in there also about publication and how to approach that. In terms of thinking about, all right, well, in my practice, what cases would be useful to share with other practitioners? And the whole idea is, we are a community of practitioners. In Western medicine, a lot of the research and advances, they come from the large institutions, the pharmaceuticals and the universities that require a lot of financial investment to be able to get these studies off the ground and published. Well, for a case report, since they're coming from, it's sort of a grassroots effort. They're coming from a lot of the different practitioners, that's where a lot of the advances in Chinese medicine come from. For the clinical trials, they're helping us with acceptance and validation in the community and in the political legal system. But for actually learning to do Chinese medicine better, thinking about what cases that we think we did well with, or what patients did well, and sharing that with the broader community in the form of a case report is something that is going to really help us immensely.
Excellent. And how would you think that would then improve our chances or opportunities to integrate into the mainstream and to become a bigger part of the overall medical discipline, specifically with regards to the TCM profession?
Sure. So one of the aspects about integrative medicine that I get into a little bit in the book is that the word integrative means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And the way that I see integrative is we're trying to use the strengths of our medicine and sort of find a way to combine them with perhaps other strengths of Western medicine to have sort of a synergistic effect. So that's one way to do it. Another way is possibly to use the strength of Chinese medicine and pair it up with a deficiency in Western medicine. So for example, chemotherapy. And chemotherapy obviously has, I guess maybe arguably there's been a lot of research into chemotherapy, and it has helped a lot of people to be able to fight and get through cancer. But there's a cost, of course, all of the side effects of Western medicine. And it's not just chemotherapy, but pharmaceuticals, surgeries, there are adverse effects that acupuncture and Chinese medicine has the capability of balancing out, of making up for those deficiencies. So if we think about those types of interactions, we can think about, all right, well, how is the Western medicine system integrating with Chinese medicine? If we write specifically about how we're able to put those two together in a practical sense, rather than in just a theoretical sense or a political sense or an economic sense, but of a practical sense, that is what's going to make patients better. And that's the whole goal.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you have anything else you want to add to our short interlude? Any specific points, questions for me about Europe?
I guess in the United States, the education is primarily TCM in most schools, but there are advanced courses in Dong style acupuncture and balance method and Japanese, and there are so many different ways.
Orthopedics and tongue points, yeah.
Exactly, of understanding and reinterpreting Chinese medicine. One of the exciting things in case reports is when there are some of these approaches that maybe you're not as familiar, there's not as much of a record on, people can contribute those, and that's where a lot of the learning takes place. In Europe, is there a similar, I guess, a style of education and excitement to go into a lot of different directions?
There's something that needs to be said up front. I think there's a big difference in terms of where we are in terms of the acceptance, regulatory functions, and mainstreaming of the traditional medicine in comparison to the United States. Now, in Europe, some countries are far ahead, others are not. And part of the problem is that each individual country is responsible for their own regulation and acceptance and educational standards, et cetera, for the various medical disciplines, for various practices. So even, in fact, in some countries, TCM is not even a recognized medical profession. So from that perspective, the education standards are different from country to country. But as far as the variability of different modalities, schools, if you will. There are a variety of schools. There's the 5-element schools. There's the Dong school, the orthopedic schools, a variety of schools. And I think to a certain degree, even maybe to a detriment, because of the lack of regulation that we're striving at ETCMA to bring forth, there are a lot of fringe practitioners, practitioners who combine gua sha with magic incantations, and that falls under the auspice of TCM, and it changes the view of the decision makers, of the general public, of what is TCM. So I think one of the challenges that we face here in Europe is trying to establish a unified educational standard and a model that represents the profession as a regulated and disciplined medical profession, rather than the fringe elements. Now, when it comes to integrating other components, like you said, and working together in that environment, I myself have integrated from Western allopathics components into my practice. One of the case reports that I'm in the process of publishing right now is a stroke rehab with game therapy, combination of acupuncture with gaming therapy. and how that works in neuroplasticity, in neurorehabilitation. So again, taking these unique strengths and weaknesses, if you will, combining them, if you can take a strong aspect of, let's say, in neurorehabilitation with scalp acupuncture, with electrostimulation, and you put these two strong points together, you can create a very novel idea and a novel treatment approach that produces some wonderful results clinically, some wonderful results. So I appreciate your take on it. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yes, of course. So thank you. Thank you. It's
what
nice
I would like to suggest, if you don't mind, Dr. Chiu, is I would love to have you back. In fact, I'd like to, I'm going to advocate your book to our members. And at some point in time, I'd like to invite you back for a more thorough, perhaps a class series, perhaps a lecture series with our members through the research task force. So I look forward to having you back. Perhaps you can even visit us in Greece.
Very happy to do so. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us. You have a lovely day. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.